Hello and welcome to this video tutorial brought to you by tastytudes.com. In this video we are going to do a photo manipulation exercise in Adobe Photoshop. We are going to turn this man's face on the left into a Darth Maul face. Be sure to download the PDF worksheet to follow along with this video tutorial. This has a breakdown of everything in this video from the detailed document layer structure and includes all download links featured in this video tutorial. In this video, I'm going to share with you the techniques and tools I used in Adobe Photoshop to achieve the finished transformation. So here is my Photoshop document. You can download this in the description and have a closer look. But I want to cover the document quickly before we get started, so you can have a good idea of how it was made and what we will be creating later on in the video tutorial. If you're not interested in this part of the video, then you can simply go to the timeline and skip ahead now. So let's take a look at the document. Well, I have my layers panel open here on the right. If you don't see this, you can come up to Windows, scroll down, and you'll see layers there, and you can click and activate the panel there. So we have 3 layer folders in the layers panel, and I'm going to drop these down so we can see what is inside them. And we can see that some of the layer folders include single layers, individual layers, and another folder contains more layer folders. And we can toggle these as well to reveal what's inside each one of these. Let's quickly do that. So now we can see that this document actually has quite a few layers, but they've all been organized in these folders, so you can get a good idea of how it was made and just to neaten everything up a little bit. So let's just drop all these down. So also, if we look closely, we can see that some of the layer groups have these masks here. For example, let's have a look at the face here, and we can see that there's items within this layer group, and we even have some adjustment layers here. So in this video tutorial, we're going to be covering quite a few things such as layer masks, adjustment layers, and things like that. So if you're not familiar with them at the moment, don't worry, because by the end of the video tutorial, you will be. Right, so let's take a look at these layers and layer groups and see what exactly they're doing. So let's drop these down a little bit. Right, so let's start from the top. We have this layer folder here called lighting effects. And if I toggle the visibility of that, you can see the effect this is having. Because in this folder, there's a series of layers like a vignette, and there'll be a layer with an overlay. And we'll be using a lot of layer blending modes as well in this tutorial, so we'll be learning a lot about that. So let's toggle the visibility of that. And then we have the Darth Maul layer group, and you can see that this contains all the elements for the Darth Maul character. And here we have a horns group, so we've got the horns in a separate group, and we've got the eyes, that's also in a separate group. We have the clothing in a separate group. We have a layer called the face shadow, some further effects there. We have the face pattern, and then we have the colors of the face that make up the face, and again the face itself, and of course finally the background. So you can see that all the major elements that make up this image exist in their own layer folders, and they have been carefully positioned in the layers panel to get the desired effect. So with all that covered, let's make a start and see how we are going to put all this into practice. So to begin, you're going to need a photograph. I have chosen this photograph, and I have actually purchased this off a royalty-free website called photogene.net. They've got quite a variety of images, and they're all at reasonably fair prices. So let's come back into Photoshop. So I have this image here. Now, if you're going to attempt to do this, try and get an image of fairly decent quality, good lighting effects, and of a fairly large size, because that way you'll achieve some fairly good results. Let's just take a quick look at the image size and see what we're working with. So we can come up to the top and click on image, come down and select image size, and we'll put up this menu here. So we've currently got this image and it's 1607 pixels by 2544 and it's at a resolution of 180. So that works out to be about 22 centimeters by 35. So that's quite a reasonable size. It's actually quite large. So I'm just going to scale this down a little bit because I'm not really going to print this image. I'm just doing it for a tutorial sake. So I'm going to put this at a screen resolution of 72. And by typing in that, you can see because all the proportions are constrained, that has now made the width 643 pixels by 1018 pixels. Okay, let's click OK on that. And you'll see that the image has been scaled down. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. And we can see that the image is still fairly large and still of good quality. Now also this image is fairly large as well, and you can see that the head is rather small on the canvas. So I'm going to just crop this. So by pressing C on the keyboard, I'm just going to pull up my crop tool and I'm just going to crop out some of this, some of the image here. Let's go for something like this. Let's try that. Let's press enter and zoom in. And there you go, that is looking quite good. I prepare the image now, so I'm ready to make a start. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to isolate the head part. I don't want any of this background, and I don't particularly want any of the clothing. So I'm going to start to cut out this face. Now if we look on our layers panel, we can see that upon opening this JPEG image in Photoshop, it's a single layer and it's actually locked. Here you can see the lock icon. Now what I want to do is I want to create another layer underneath this. So I can do this quite simply by first pressing Command A to select all. Then I'm going to press Command X to cut. Now you can see upon doing that we have a white layer, and if I press Command V, and if we look in our layers panel, we have just pasted that new layer in, and upon pasting that has created a new layer. So you've still got our white background and our new layer here, and by default it is called that layer 1. So I'm just going to double click on that layer 1 and rename this to face. Okay, right, so let's start to cut out this face here. Now to do that, I'm going to use a layer mask, and to create the layer mask, I'm going to use the pen tool. So I can either come over to my menu and select the pen tool, or I can just simply press P on the keyboard to pull it up that way. Okay, so I'm going to make a start by drawing points around the face like so. So I'm just going to click around my face and drop a series of anchor points. Now, once you've successfully drawn all your anchor points around the face and joined up your path, we're going to come back to the menu, and I'm just going to click and hold on the pen tool and pull up my Convert Point tool. Convert Point tool. Now, let's zoom in. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select on all the points that I just dropped around the face, and I'm going to add some curves to the line. I can do this by clicking and dragging on a point, and I can pull out some anchor points here. And upon doing that, I can add some curvature to the line there. So let's start to move around the face and add some curvature to the lines here. Now, it's as simple as clicking and dragging to pull out the anchor points, and normally you get 2, and once you've dropped your anchor point, you can come back and further toggle other anchor points. So by clicking and dragging, you can pull out 2 anchor points, and once you've got a curve which you're happy with, you can come back and edit it further. So I'm just going to go around my path and just add curves to all these lines. And after a while, hopefully you'll have a nice path that goes around the ears and the jawline and the neck here. Notice that I didn't really pay much attention to the top of the head here, and there's a good reason for that, and I'll explain this shortly. So once you have your path drawn, we're now going to create the layer mask. So let's come over to the layers panel. The first thing I'm going to do is click on my face layer. Before I do anything else, I'm going to quickly group this. So by pressing Command G, I'm going to group this or turn this layer into a group. So now you can see we have a folder icon here. If I double click on the group 1 name, I can rename this folder to face. Right then, so let's toggle this. We have our layer folder here. So let's come back over to our image, and I'm going to press P to put up my pen tool. And with my line here, I'm going to put my mouse cursor over the path. I'm going to right click and select Make Selection. And I'm going to click OK. Now that path has been turned into a selection area. So now with this selection, I'm going to make sure that my group is selected. We can see that it's selected here in the layers panel. And I'm going to come down to the bottom of my layers panel, and you can see we've got some icons here. Third icon from the left is the Add Layer Mask. So I'm just going to click that once. And now we can see that we've applied that layer mask. And if we look closely in our layers panel, we can see that we have a new icon placed on the layer group folder, or next to it. We can see that this consists of some white and black areas. So the white area is the areas of the mask that are revealed, and the black is the areas that are hidden. So once we have created this initial mask, it is now time to address the head here. You can see it's pretty rough around the top here, and the reason for that is because I don't know what images you're going to be using. You might be using an image of a man with a bald head, or you might use an image of a person with dreads or fairly big hair. And if you do use an image with someone with big hair, it's going to be quite hard to create a nice smooth head shape. So to make this easy for you, I have created the image pack. And in this you can get all the elements we are going to be using in this video. But for now I'm going to be using the head guide. So I have a shape here which I'm going to use. So I'm going to drag this element into my composition like so. Let's zoom out because this image is actually, this object is actually quite big. So I'm going to press Command T to pull up my free transform, and I'm going to press Shift Alt on the keyboard just to click and scale this down nicely. So let's zoom in a little bit further. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this object as a guide to get a nice smooth head. So let me demonstrate. So by holding Shift this time I'm going to scale it up a little differently. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and position this head shape on my layer below to try and get an accurate size. So let's move this around a little bit. I'm going to press Enter to change the scale. And I'm going to come over to my layers panel. I'm going to change this to about 50% so I can just, maybe a little bit more, maybe about 70% so I can see through it. Right, so by pressing V and put up my selection tool, I can just use my arrow keys to move this around a little bit. So what I'm going to try and do is get a fairly accurate size, position this somewhere I want. Okay, let's try and go for this. Right, so when I've positioned my head object in an area which I'm happy with, I'm going to come over to my menu and grab the magic wand tool. Then I'm going to click outside the head object, and now we've created a selection. So I'm going to come over to my layers panel and just toggle the visibility of my head guide because I don't need this anymore. And what you want to try and do is get the head selection to just meet by the ears here. And you can see I've done a fairly decent job of that. So now we're going to come back to our face group, particularly the face mask. And remember what I said earlier on about the black hiding the layer and the white revealing the layer. So we're going to come over to my menu and pull up the brush tool. And we're going to try and get a nice big rounded brush. It's looking quite big there. And then we're going to go for an opacity of 100. And with the layer mask thumbnail selected, I'm going to come ahead and start to click on the mask. And you can see now that we're beginning to edit the mask and edit out some of the head here. And I'm just going to carry on drawing like so. Now I can press Command D to deselect, and now you can see that we have a nice round head shape. So once you've got to this stage and you have masked out your face and we've got a nice round head shape, it is time to clone away the hair or remove all the hair on our face because our Darth Maul character has no hair. So first we can come to our layers panel and just click on the head guide and we can delete that because we don't need this anymore. So let's drop down our face group to reveal the layer inside. So we're going to click on the face group, the face layer. Make sure we have this face layer selected. And we're going to come over to our clone tool. So we can come over to the menu and we can either select our clone tool, the clone stamp tool, or we can press S on the keyboard and that will pull up your clone stamp tool. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to make a start here. So with the clone tool activated, I'm going to press Alt on the keyboard. And when you press and hold Alt, you'll have this crosshair. Now this is Photoshop asking us what do we want to clone. So I'm going to start in the center of the forehead and just click once. And when I leave go of Alt, we'll come back to our brush and we'll be able to see a slight pink area inside our brush. Now this is Photoshop telling us this is part of the area we've selected. So make sure your opacity is at 100%. So I'm going to start to click and now you can see what I'm doing. I'm starting to clone some of the forehead there and clone away the hair. I'm just going to keep clicking up to the top to remove that hair. And then you'll get to a point where you're going to have to press Alt again to choose another area to clone. So I'm going to choose the center of the forehead again, so click there, and then clone away the sides. And I'm going to have to press Alt to click another area. Click and drag, like so. Let's try the other side of the face, the other side of the head rather. Click Alt by holding Alt. Pull up my crosshair and select an area and clone that away. Alt, click, and clone the face. I'm going to have to toggle my brush size to make this a little smaller so I can get in there. Alt, click, and clone. Clone away these little bits of hair. And again here. Alt, click. There you go, so now we've got rid of all the hair on the head. I'm going to do the same for the eyebrows. So I'm going to press S to put my clone tool, press Alt, I'm just going to select an area above the eyebrows, click, and just clone away the eyebrows like so. Do the same here, press Alt, click, and just clone away the eyebrows. So soon you'll have something that looks like this. Okay, so once we have cloned away all the hair and we're happy with our hairless face, it is now time to focus on the skin tone and make a series of modifications to create the red skin tone of our Darth Maul character. Okay, so let's make a start and we're going to do some modifications to our face layer. So I'm going to now add some adjustment layers. So I'm going to add my first adjustment layer. So with my face layer selected, I'm going to come to the bottom of my layers panel, and the fourth icon from the left, we'll find this icon here, and this is create new fill or adjustment layer. So I'm going to click this once, and up will pop a menu, and I'm going to select hue saturation. And up should pop a new panel called the adjustments, and here we're going to have all the values we can tweak. So I'm going to start by selecting the saturation panel or the toggle and pull this all the way to the left just to make this image grayscale. And I'm going to come to the bottom of this adjustments panel and click on the third icon from the left, and this will ensure that this adjustment layer will only affect the layer below it. So let's click that once, and if we look in our layers panel we can see this little arrow icon pointing to that layer below. So now we know that this adjustments layer will only apply to this single layer and nothing else. Okay, so now I have made my image grayscale and I'm going to apply another adjustment layer. So I'm going to come back down to the bottom of my layers panel and click this once again, but this time I'm going to add a levels adjustment layer. And again, I'm going to click this little button here to only apply this adjustment to this layer here. And I'm going to add some values to my levels. So I'm going to click 77. I'm going to press Shift to jump to the next value. And I'm going to keep this at 1.0. I'm going to press Shift again and type in 219. And I'm done now with the adjustments panel for now. So I'm just going to click X to get rid of that. So now what we've done is we've created the face into a grayscale, and by using the levels adjustments panel, I've just given it a bit more contrast. But on reflection, that might look a little bit extreme. So I'm going to come back into my levels adjustment layer by double clicking on it. I'm going to pull up that panel again. And these adjustment layers mean that nothing is really set in stone. So I can have the flexibility to come back whenever I like and adjust them. So let's close this. And if we toggle the visibility of our adjustment layers, we can in theory turn them off. So nothing again is set in stone. Okay, so using a series of adjustment layers, we were able to turn the face from a pink color to this black and white image you see here. But now you might be asking yourself, well, Darth Maul is red. He isn't black and white. So let's go about changing the color or the skin tone to red. So I'm going to do this by using a series of colored layers, and by using a series of blending modes, I'll be able to achieve a fairly realistic effect. So let's go ahead and do this. So first I'm going to start by creating a new layer by pressing Command Shift N. And I'm just going to create a new layer, and we don't have to worry about the name of that yet. And with that new layer created, I'm going to come over to my menu panel, and we've got our colors here. I'm just going to click on the top color, and I'm going to type in a specific value. So I'm going to type in 7854554 and click OK. And with that new color, I'm going to come to my paint bucket and just come over to my new layer and just fill that layer. Zoom out a little bit. So now you can see we've got this fill of the whole layer. Now I'm going to come to my layers panel, and in the top left you'll see we have this drop down menu here, and I'm going to select that and come down to overlay. So I'm going to apply an overlay to this color. So now you can see what has happened here. Now we have this really subtle sort of maroon effect on the face. And that's looking quite interesting. But I'm going to create another layer by pressing Command Shift N. And again, I'm just going to click OK and not worry about the naming of that for now. And I'm going to come again over to my menu and select the color. And I'm going to type in another color value. This time it's going to be B47119. OK. And again, I'm going to come over to my menu and grab my fill tool. Just hit that. And now we've got this orange color here, and I'm going to apply another blending mode. So I'm going to come up to my layers menu, click on that top left tablet. This time I'm going to come down to, what are we going to go with this time? We're going to go for linear burn. And let's zoom in and have a look at that. You can see the effect that is happening. We're now adding, we've got a nice rich sort of glow on the face here, but that's a bit extreme, so I'm going to change this down to about 50%. Let's go with about 50% because we just want to build these up slightly. Okay, so I'm going to create another layer again by pressing Command Shift N. I'm going to create another layer, okay, and I'm going to choose another color. This time my color is going to be B21E1D, and now you can see this is kind of like a dark red color. Okay, so again I'm going to fill this layer, and this time I'm going to come to my layer blending mode options and select multiply, and I'm going to change the opacity to about 80%. And now you can see I've built up a nice red tone here. Now if you want to, we can make this even darker by just right clicking and duplicating the layer. Okay, and now you can see that that's made it really nice and red and dark. And if you think that this is a little bit too much, then we can come over to the opacity of this layer and tweak it further. So what we've done is we've just created a series of colored layers that, with certain blending modes applied, we have built up this nice red texture here. And we've got a few layers which we can toggle. This has created the flexibility so we can come back as and when we like and make further modifications. So now we have all these colored layers, we need to sort them out, we need to manage them. So let's come over to the layers panel, and with the top layer selected, I'm going to press shift and select the bottom layer. So now I've selected all the layers, and I'm going to press command G, and I'm going to group these layers together. So I'm going to double click on the group 1 text and rename this group to colors. Now you can see that we have all this red outside the face. Well, there's a simple solution for this. We can come back to the layer mask icon that we originally created for the face, and if I right click and come down to add mask to selection, you'll see that we'll pull up a nice selection around the head here. And if we come to our colors group, make sure that the colors group is selected, we're going to come down and we are going to click on the add layer mask icon. So let's do that, click once, and we will apply the mask to the colors group. Excellent, so now we have the face all masked out and we have our red skin tone that we are happy with. It is now time to bring in the classic Darth Maul face texture pattern. So we can do this by coming over to the image pack, and you'll see here that I have a face pattern group that I have created earlier. And if we drop this down, we can see that this consists of all the various parts of the pattern that we are going to use. So now I am going to click on the group and just simply drag this into our composition. You can see that's quite big there, so let's zoom out a little bit. I'm going to press Command T to pull up my free transform, and by holding Shift, I'm going to be able to scale this down. So now I'm going to just scale this down and try and get it on the face to a reasonable position. Let's have a look at this. We might have to tweak this scale slightly. We might have to drag this down a little bit and pull this down until we get something that looks like this. Now, once we are happy with the general size, it's time to get in and do some modifications to the positioning of the pattern. But the first thing I'm going to do is come over to my face pattern group, and I'm going to apply a mask to this group as well. So I'm going to come to any one of the masks below on the colors of the face group and just click on the mask icon. I want to right click and add mask to selection to create this selection like so. I'm going to come over to the face pattern group and add the layer mask by selecting on the third icon from the left at the bottom of the panel. Let's do that, add layer mask, and you'll see we'll apply a mask to the group here. So let's drop down the face pattern group and we can see all the layers involved. And I'm going to change the opacity to the group to about 70%. Let's change it to about 70% and let's zoom in and we can start to see some of the features through the pattern here. Right, so I'm going to press V to pull up my selection tool, and this is going to enable me to right click on my canvas or work document and I'll be able to see the layers underneath. So let's start here. If I right click, we've got our face pattern group and we've got the right eye. So if I select this, this is going to enable me to move this part around. So I'm just going to use my arrow keys just to move this into place slightly. I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to right click and select the left eye part and move this into position I feel it needs to be. We're going to do this for all the various parts. So right click, we've got the middle lip section. Let's move this around and we've got the right lip little part here and the left lip. And let's move up and look at some other parts. Let's right click here, select the nose. Let's move that down a little bit. If we think that some of these elements are a bit big, we can press Command T and just pull up a free transform and scale these down a little bit. Let's come up a bit more. Maybe this middle pattern here isn't in the right place. Right click, middle nose. Let's move that down a little. Perhaps press Command T, rotate that a little. Position that. And let's come up to the top of the head. Let's right click here, maybe move this down a little. And the same with the other piece. Okay, now you might find that moving parts of the pattern around, some of them might not join up right. Let's zoom in, like this area here. So what we can do is right click and select the right eye top, and press Command T, and just pull this down. Make sure that they all join up nicely. Enter. And again here. Do this, like so. Zoom out. Maybe these little pieces here, we might want to just press Command T and by holding Shift blow these up a little bit, like so. Maybe this one too, right click, left eye spot, Command T, holding Shift, just blow this up a little bit. It's looking quite cool. Now let's look at the side of the head. If we look at the ears in particular, we can see that this black area is sort of not sitting right, and we've got some red areas on the side of the head which we don't really want. So how are we going to address this? So let's press V to pull up our selection tool, and if I right click we can select the right face, and this is the right face area. So once we can see what we're going to do, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the warp tool here. So let's come to Edit, Transform, Warp. And when we pull up the warp tool, we'll have this grid that surrounds the object. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place my mouse over the area which I want to warp. I'm just going to click and hold. Just warp slightly. Let's zoom in and take a closer look. Let's warp on the chin here. Let's try and get it all nice and aligned. Let's come up and we can push this out a little bit and we can pull it back in. So you can see this part of the face pattern needs to sit along the sort of head. So let's pull this up a little and just bring it in and just pull it down and out until we get something that we're sort of happy with. If we look at the lip here, we want to pull that up a little bit and maybe down a little bit here. So soon we'll get something that we're fairly happy with. Let's pull this up a little bit. And then just press enter. So you can see that is sitting quite nicely there. Let's do the same to the other side. Press V to put my selection tool, right click, put up my left face, come to Edit, Transform, Warp. Let's do the same. Let's pull this part down on the jaw, this chin area here. Let's pull this up to meet the lip part. Let's have a look at the top of the head. Let's pull this out. And let's press enter. Zoom out a little bit. That's looking quite cool. Now, again on the ears, we can see that we've still got some red bits that we don't want. So what I can do is I can right click and pull up the right side of the face. And if I come to my menu and select a black brush, or black color rather, select a black color, pull up my brush, I can just draw on there and add to that layer. We can do the same for the other side, pressing V to put up my selection tool. I'm going to right click and select the left face, and press B to pull up my brush tool. And we've already got our black color selected. I'm just going to click and add to the ear there and zoom out. So now we've got a nice pattern going on here. But if we look a little bit closer, we can see upon warping some of these parts, we don't have any joins here anymore. So I'm going to right click on the area, and we're going to select this right cheek patch, like so. I'm just going to press Command T, and I can just use the free transform just to pull this back into position so it looks like it's joining. I can do the same here for the eye right. Command T, I can just pull that over so it's all joining nicely. And again, let's do it for the left eye. Command T, and let's pull that up until they're all joining nicely. And again, left cheek patch. Use the arrow keys. So now you should have something that looks a bit like this. We have tweaked the parts of the face pattern and positioned them all in the correct areas, and everything's joining and everything looks nice. Now we can start to move on. Now, if we think that the face is looking a little flat at this point, and we want to bring out some more contrast of the shadows or bring out some more features, we can do this quite simply. We can come down to our face group, and we can right click and duplicate this group and click OK. And I'm going to drag this folder all the way to the top. And now you can see that we have our face layer here, and we can see the black and white image that we had. And I'm going to double click on this and call this face shadow. Okay. Now I'm going to apply a layer blending mode to this group. So I'm going to drop down on the layer blending mode options, and I'm going to select linear burn. And you can see the effect that has, and it's very dark, but we can just simply change the opacity of this. So if we bring the opacity down quite a bit, let's go with something about 18%. And if we toggle the visibility, you can see what this is doing. This is just increasing the shadows of the face here on some of the features, so it doesn't look so flat, and we can tweak this as and when we like to just boost this. So let's leave it at about 20. Right, so that's the face sorted so far. Let's think about bringing in some other elements. So let's come back into our image pack, and this time I'm going to right click and select my suit. Here we go. So now I'm going to bring in the suit into my composition. So I'm just going to click and drag this into my comp. Zoom out a little bit. Press V so I can move this around. It's looking quite big, so I'm going to press Command T to bring up my free transform. I'm going to press Shift Alt on my keyboard so I can scale this down like so. I'll zoom in a bit and try and find the correct size. So I'm going to hold Shift and click and drag. Let's pull it out slightly. Let's move this up a bit. Let's try and find a good area. This is looking pretty good. So let's go with that. I'm going to press Enter. Maybe actually I'm going to press Command T again. I'm just going to bring up my free transform, but this time I'm just going to stretch it down slightly. There you go. Let's stretch that down slightly. Press Enter. It's looking quite good. And move that up. So we can see that the corners of this neck area here is really sitting nicely on our face. Zoom out. Just going to change the canvas size a little bit. Image, canvas size. And I'm just going to tweak the width a little. Let's make the width about 21. Let's keep the height, maybe let's tweak the height. Let's make that 32 centimeters. Okay. And I'm just going to come over to my layers panel. And with my top layer selected, I'm just going to press Shift and select the bottom group. So now I've got everything selected. And I'm just going to press V to put up my selection tool, and just move all this down to the bottom like so. And let's zoom in slightly. Now the suit is looking a little bit bright, so I want to darken this up a little bit. So I'm going to come over to my layers panel and select the suit layer, and I'm going to add an adjustment layer. So I'm going to come down to the bottom of my panel like before and select on the create new fill or adjustment layer. I'm going to click that. And then this time I'm going to select levels. So I'm going to toggle this slightly. But be sure to hit the button on the bottom of the adjustments layer panel, because if you don't, as you can see here, it's affecting everything below. So let's click this button here, the third from the left, which is this adjustment affects all layers below. So let's click that. And now you'll see in the layers panel you have this little arrow. So it'll only apply to that layer there. So let's just go ahead and tweak the levels of this just to darken up our suit layer there. And let's leave it at that for now because that's looking quite cool. Let's get rid of the adjustments panel and zoom out. So once we're happy with the positioning of the suit, we're just going to group this up on the layers panel. So let's select our suit layer and press Command G, and we're going to group that. So let's double click on here and call this suit. Okay, so now it's time to bring in the horns. So let's come back to our image pack here, and let's select the horns group from the layers panel and click and drag this into our comp like so. So as you can see, they're pretty big here. So let's press Command T to pull up my free transform, and I'm going to press Shift Alt on the keyboard and scale these down like so, and just move these into place. Scale them down, and by using my arrow keys I can just finally place these. So I'm going to get the middle one positioned where I'm happy with, and just press enter. And if I pull down the horns group, we can see that each horn is on an individual layer. So if I come over and right click here, for example, on horn 1, I'll be able to just finally tune this and position it where I like using the arrow keys. Let's go ahead and move horn 2 and perhaps move horn 4 and 5. So once we're happy with the positioning of the horns, we can then come back into our image pack and select the eyes group, and we're going to bring these in. So let's drag these into our comp like so, and again these are looking pretty big, so let's press Command T to put my free transform, and again Shift Alt on the keyboard and scale down like so. So I'm just going to look about position these where I'm happy. Let's come in, press enter. So I'm going to just tweak the opacity to about 50% so I can see through them, so I can get a good idea of the size of the eyes here. Let's press Command T and just scale them down a little bit. That's great. So I'm just going to get the right eye in the right position. It's looking good. And then I can just right click here and hit eye left and just position this over like so. Let's zoom out and have a look at this. Maybe pressing V, put up my selection tool. I can just right click and select the right eye and just reposition this. And once I'm happy with that, I can come back to my eyes group and change the opacity back to 100%. Now these eyes are looking rather bright, and we want to darken them up a little bit so they look a bit more in sync with the rest of the face. So we can do this rather quickly by using one technique. I'm going to come over to my layers panel, and we have our eyes folder here. I'm just going to select both left and right eye by selecting on the top layer and holding Shift. I'm going to select the eye underneath, so now we've got them both selected. I'm going to right click and duplicate layers, just click OK. And I'm going to press Command E, and that's just going to merge these into a single layer. And I'm going to use a blending mode, and I'm going to select multiply. Now you can see that that's darkened them up quite drastically there, but I'm just going to toggle the opacity to tweak this. So let's come down to the bottom and just come up slightly, and we can choose something that we quite like. Let's go for around about 50% and zoom out, take a look at that. So let's toggle the visibility of this layer we've just created and see the difference. So that was before and that was after. So it's a subtle effect, but it just makes it look a little bit more darker. So now that completes all the main elements of our Darth Maul character. So let's come over to our layers panel and just toggle that eyes folder, so now you can see they're all there. What I'm going to do next is select all the layer groups. So with the top group selected, I'm going to press Shift on the keyboard and select the bottom folder. So now we can see we have them all selected. I'm going to press Command G on the keyboard, and now I'm going to double click and call this Darth Maul. So now everything is contained neatly in one layer folder. So with this, I'm going to select this new layer folder and right click and duplicate the group. Click OK. But this time I'm going to press Command E, and that's going to flatten the group. So now we have the entire group and a single layer on top. And I'm going to use this single layer to create an overall lighting effect on everything below. So let's see. I'm going to come to the layers panel, and with this new layer selected, I'm going to drop down my layer blending mode option and select overlay. And you can see that this is darkened everything up, but this is looking a little bit extreme. So I'm just going to come to my opacity and change this. So I'm going to go from 0 and just push it up a little bit to really boost the lighting there. But if we zoom in slightly, I'm going to use this layer for something else as well. I'm just going to add a little bit of grittiness to the overall texture because I like to have that as my sort of finished outlook. You don't have to do this, but it's something I like to do. So let's come to filter, and I'm going to come to sharpen, sharpen more, and I'm going to do this once again, filter, sharpen, sharpen more. And you can see that we've just added this cool effect. So if I come to the layers panel and toggle visibility, we can see what we had before. So this is what we had before, and this is what we had after. So using the sharpen tool and the overlay, we were able to add this lighting effect with a sort of gritty feel. And I just think that makes the whole image look a little bit more darker and badass. So, and the horns are looking pretty good there too. So now we're going to bring in the background. So I'm going to come over to this image here. And this is another image which I purchased off photogene.net. And I thought that this was appropriate, quite sci-fi looking. So I'm going to press Command A to select all, Command C to copy, and then come back into my composition and press Command V to paste. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit because that's looking quite big on my canvas. So pressing Command T, I'm just going to bring this in and reduce the scale. Shift Alt on my keyboard. That's going to scale this down quite nicely. So I'm just press Enter. And I'm going to come to my layers panel and we can see it on the top. So I'm going to quickly click and drag this down underneath my Darth Maul layer. So zoom in a little bit more. And by pressing B, I can pull up my selection tool and move this around like so. Now it's looking blue, but I want it to look red. So I'm going to apply an adjustment layer. So with the layer selected, I'm going to come down to my adjustments layer icon and click to put up my options, and I'm going to go for hue saturation. And again, I'm going to select this little button here that only applies the effect to this layer below. And let's pull my hue. And let's try and find something that looks red. That's looking quite cool. Maybe even push up the saturation slightly. Now I'll just leave it at 0, I think. Let's leave it at 0 for now. And that's looking okay. So I'm just going to close down my adjustments layer. And I'm going to come over to my layers panel and select on my background layer and press Command G. I'm going to group this and call this layer background. Now what I'm going to do next is just right click on this background group and duplicate the group. Okay. And then I'm going to come to my layer blending modes and just hit overlay. You can see the effect that is happening. It's really boosted the contrast there very quickly, but that is looking a bit intense. So I'm just going to change the opacity, toggle this, and try and find something that's not too extreme. Maybe let's go with about 50%. Let's try that. Okay. Let's zoom out and see how that looks. That's looking pretty cool. And now with those two new background groups, I'm just going to arrange this neat into one folder. So I'm with the top group selected, I'm going to hold Shift and select the one below and press Command G to group. Let's call this background. Background. And now what I can do is press Command T. So I just want to change the scale just a little bit. So I can press hold Shift and Alt and just bring it in. And I'm just going to try and get a smaller angle here, just so I can get the curvature of the earth coming in a little better. Zoom out. Maybe I'm going to stretch this, up a little bit like so. Just so it's creeping in from behind his shoulders like that. It's looking quite cool. And maybe I don't want the image to be so tall, so I'm going to press C just to pull up my crop tool and just draw around like so and press Enter. That's looking a little bit more interesting. Now if you think that the suit layer in the back is looking awfully bright, you can see it's quite light, we can create a shadow layer to mask this off a little bit. So let's do this. So let's come to our Darth Maul folder and drop this down and come to our suit group here. What I'm going to do is pull up the magic wand tool and just click outside, and you can see now we've created a selection outside the suit. If I press Command Shift and I, I'm going to invert the selection. So I'm going to create a new layer above the suit by pressing Command Shift N. Let's click OK. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my brush in my menu, select my brush, and I'm going to go for a feathered brush, like so, quite a fairly large brush. And my opacity is 100%, that's okay. Maybe toggle the size slightly, and I'm just going to start to draw on top, like so. So we've just drawn a nice black layer. I'm going to press Command D to deselect this, and I'm just going to change the opacity. So I can toggle the opacity of this just to bring it in slightly. And if you look, by doing that, we have this nasty looking shadow effect here. We can get rid of this by just pressing E and select a feathered brush and just come along and delete this part and erase this part like so. So we're almost finished, and we're going to create one more effect, and I'm going to create the last layer and make a vignette. So let's come over to our layers panel, and with my top layer selected, I'm going to press Command Shift N, and I'm going to name this vignette. Okay, and I'm going to come over to my menu and select a black color and select my paint bucket fill and fill that layer like so. Then I'm going to come back to my menu and select my marquee tool, my elliptical marquee tool, and I'm going to come over and start in the top left and just click and drag and create this elliptical shape like so. And then I'm going to press Command Shift I to invert the selection, and I'm going to come to my layers panel, and then I'm going to come to the bottom and add a layer mask. So you can see by doing the layer mask, we now have this big black border around the outside. But now I'm going to come to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And you can see what's going on here. So let's have a look at this, and let's come in here and tweak our vignette. So now we want to get something a little bit like that. So I'm going to go for that and click OK. And if we want to, we can toggle the opacity of this vignette, and I'm going to just go with something around 75. And once I'm happy with that, I'm just going to select my vignette layer, and by holding Shift, I'm going to select the Darth Maul copy, and I'm going to press Command G to group these together, and I'm going to double click and call this lighting effect. And that's it. That's how you can take a portrait and turn it into a Darth Maul character. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. If you were not previously aware of the blending modes and tools covered in this tutorial, then I hope it helps you think about how you could use them in your digital artwork. If you wish to hear about more up-and-coming video tutorials and general creative news and updates, you can follow me on Twitter. If you liked the tutorial, go ahead and click the like button on my Facebook fan page, and even add me as a friend. And, of course, check out and subscribe for free to the tastycheats.com website. Don't forget, you can download all the images and documents you saw here in this tutorial. All links are in the description. Well, that's it for another video, brought to you by tastycheats.com. Have fun, guys, and I'll see you next time.